Welcome to Drop the Mic, broadcasting from The Lounge, also known as the Cigar Affair in downtown Maumee, Ohio. I'm Mike, your host. Thanks for joining us for insightful conversations about business, technology, leadership, and entrepreneurship. Alongside my co-hosts Brendan and Zach, together we'll dive into the latest trends, share valuable insights, and interview inspiring guests. Now, get ready for Drop the Mic. So the question that I have is, when, back in the day, would you ever have thought that you would be into solution sales? Because really, that's the hat, right? I mean, yes, you're a solution seller now. And you have to, unfortunately, in entrepreneurship, we learn that we have to wear a lot of hats, right? And so you're not only the guy that does the work, but you got to sell it as well.
Yeah, that was my weakest side too. Like lead acquisition and like getting leads in the door is one, and then selling. That was a huge weakness of mine. Like I wasn't the best salesman. I actually have a sales coach now, and like we go through per calls and everything else. Like it's something I've had to like really work up. Because the thing is, if you want to be like a freelancer or a gig economist or whatever you want to call it, like you got to be able to sell. Because if you don't know how to sell, you're not going to land any more clients. You're going to have any work to do.
Yeah.
So it's something that like those two things are like my MO. It's like fulfillment, it's not a problem. Like I know how to code, like I know how to build complex solutions. And
right.
All this tech stuff is like a joke to me. I worked in corporate America, no offense to what we're doing, but it's the easy side of the business in my opinion, because I know exactly what to do for the most part, or I know exactly how to figure it out. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So it's the selling and getting clients and prospects to understand that side. That's like the hardest part of the business.
And I would imagine early on, just, from the sales side, getting your clients on the phone and knowing what questions to ask and how to pose the questions to maybe get rid of some of the objections that, at the end, right? And,
yes.
Some of that stuff. So yeah, I would have to assume that would be challenging to walk into.
You don't want to act needy, right? Like, I use a lot of questions to your point. That's like definitely part of our strategy is just asking questions. I feel like that's like half the battle. It's like if I ask the right questions and I listen and I ask follow-up questions, and it's like, wow, this person actually is trying to understand my problem versus just sell me a website.
Well, and I think if you're a curious person, right, that's a kind of a prerequisite, for sales. I know a lot of people, I'm in the sales world, Brendan's in the sales world, Zach's in the sales world.
Yep.
We all know people who haven't been successful in sales. And I think it all comes down to, people are either curious, or they're not. And when you're curious now, you want to get down to, okay, what are the struggles those businesses are having, that I can help you, solve. And you'll ask the right questions to uncover not only the active pain they're having, but sometimes the latent pain, right? Sometimes the customer doesn't know, what they don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
And I'm sure, so Luke, do you run into that as well, where customers think they know what they want and you get into it and all of a sudden what they actually want is something completely different?
Yes. Yeah. This happens quite a bit. Actually, recently I steered a client away from like, hey, we need this like brand new website and all these different things. We need to connect with all these APIs from these suppliers. APIs are basically just like a way to communicate with other companies and get their data and whatnot. And I'm like, that's like thousands, tens and thousands of dollars. I'm like, why don't you just like manually upload like 200 products and like, let's test it. Yeah. So that's just an example, right? This happens a lot. Sometimes like, I would say it's like a 50-50, I would say maybe even a little bit less. Some people are like, hey, I know my website sucks. Okay. I know it's bad and I know I want it redone.
Yeah.
So those are great because I'm like, okay, well, like just tell me what we're looking at, and I can actually just like walk them through our questionnaire and be like, okay, I think I can kind of see we have a pricing sheet and everything else. So yeah, those are the easier calls when they know what they need. But yeah, there are times we run into people and they're kind of off base, right? And it's my job to hold integrity and just be like, hey, this is what I think you need, even if that means like they don't go with us, right?
Yeah. Ultimately, your sales process is part of serving the customer and helping them find a solution that's a good fit for them.
Yes.
So folks that are good at that, are walking alongside their customer through that process in an honest way, helping them try to understand something that they may not understand what they need or know what they need. And that's part of being an effective salesman and having a good sales process.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I think, back to your point, Mike, like the curiosity, right? I'm generally like just curious, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Actually, actually, I do a lot of that in the sales calls, right? It's like, hey, that's not even on my list, but I'm just kind of curious about it.
Yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, it's all about building connections, right? Whether you're a leader, managing people, whether you're in sales, selling to people, whether you're a worker, working with people, it's all about building connections. And I find a lot of times, people struggle with that, because they just don't work on those skills, right? They think that, they're going to get into a job or they're going to walk into a customer and that customer is just going to tell them everything they need to know and they're going to like each other and they're going to buy from you, right? And we know how I see you laughing. I mean, but that's what a lot of people think, but it's definitely a lot harder than that, to build those connections and really, earn the trust. And at the end of the day, people buy from who they like. And there's a lot of gurus that give sales talks that we see on TikTok and LinkedIn every day that disagree with that. They say, oh, it's sales is a numbers game and blah, blah, blah. I will never believe that. I will never believe that. I believe it's all about relationships and everything we do is about relationships. So, okay, let's transition a little bit out of sales. So now here you are, you've got money streams coming in, maybe from a couple different things you got going on. How did you handle the financial part of this business? Because that's a whole different thing, man. I mean, and so let me ask you, did you ever consider that when you started this whole thing that, there was going to be multiple streams and you were going to have to figure out how to manage the money?
Yeah, I definitely underestimated the level of effort and the amount of focus. Let's put it that way. And kind
of like we did when we decided to start this podcast.
I think it's kind of human nature in a way, or like it's easy to say and judge and correct if you don't really know, if you're not on the inside of something, right? It's kind of like, oh, that leader should have done this, should have done that. It's like, well, we don't really know that because we weren't there, right? We don't understand the inner workings or intricacies. I definitely underestimated it. I didn't factor in a bunch of different things like taxes, payroll taxes, company insurance, things that you were talking about before. I think when we first started this, like I didn't know it was going to be like $1,800 for just my family for life, not life insurance, like health insurance, right? That's just life, health insurance, right? Then we got life insurance. I had to figure that part out because that was through GM or at least some of it.
Well, then you had a corporate car, right? So trying to find a car now. I mean, now you're paying insurance, you're paying gas, you're paying the car note if you have one.
Yes. And that was another thing that kind of hurt a little bit when I bought that car. I was like, oof, that doesn't feel too good, right? Then I know it's going to be $15,000 and then another $5,000-$6,000 to repair it, right? So, I definitely, the thing is, I didn't really look at it until it was like almost too late. Let's put it that way. And then I just realized, wow, I need to put on the CFO hat here because if I don't, we're going to die. Like, this is not going to work.
You got to create a balance sheet, man.
That's exactly what I do. Like my big thing was like just cash flow. What's the cash flow situation? What's coming in? What's going out? That's like all I'm looking at the moment because we don't have like physical assets or like any depreciating assets or anything like that. We basically just have services. We have labor, There's some subscriptions and things like that. And couple other things factored in, but for the most part, that's what we're looking at. So that's what I ended up doing. I think this started in January of this year. I was like, okay, gloves off. Like I need to like actually figure this out because I'm not something's not right. Like, wait a second, we landed this like $20,000 deal, but oh wait, we only collected 10 and now it's been 3 months. It was supposed to only be 6 weeks and we still haven't collected the other 10 yet. Right.
Right.
So
then you put your collections hat on, right? And then you start making phone calls. So what was your approach in figuring all of this out? I mean, so here you are, you're not a financial guy. You're not you're not an accountant. You're not a controller. You're not any of these things. And now all of a sudden you realize the money's out of control. I don't know what's coming. I don't know what's going. And you're just a regular guy sitting there, and what went through your mind? I mean, how did you wrap your arms around this?
I mean, I try to basically just, because I'm pretty good with like memorization as far as who we're working with, what we're doing, what the amount is, things of that nature, what deal we worked with them. We have like 15 clients, but it's just in my head, it's just bouncing around. So I did realize, I'm like, I just need to put this together. Like, I don't know finance very well. I worked in finance. Like, I was technically part of the finance side of GM for the longest time. So I had some familiarity with like the financial aspects of a business. But to me, it was just like a math equation. I'm like, all right, we just need to figure out the money that's coming in, like expected money that's coming in this month. And then we track actuals, and then expected money that's going out. And then we track actuals. That started in January. And this is just kind of going to like business school, like, I had some background in business school and stuff like that. So,
but there had to be something maybe even before that, because you said you started paying yourself, so there was some payroll. I mean, did you go out and get like a QuickBooks and sit down in software and just start putting things in? I mean, how did you develop this, from scratch?
I just put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and I literally just have at the top of the sheet, I'm like, these are all the clients, expected revenue for this month. These are all of our expenses. And then it's just, a minus basically.
Yeah.
So when I see like negative 8,000, I'm like, okay, that's a problem, right? We need to like land some more deals. Now, usually good news is like, we usually start out the month. We're like, hey, we're expected to make like way more money than labor. But again, what happens in reality is like things happen.
Yeah.
Clients don't show up.
Yep.
They drag their feet. Things of this nature. I don't, it's not saying I hate the client or anything like that. It's just kind of like the nature of the game a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you ever experience, since you work in a software platform, do you ever experience like technical difficulties that cost you money? Like their software is down, or their site is, down, and all of a sudden you're affected. You can't do, your work. Does that ever happen to you?
Happens from time to time. The good news, Shopify is very big and invests a lot in like infrastructure, technology, testing, and things of these nature. It's almost better sometimes to be tied to them, because then they're more consistent than we could probably be from like a technical perspective when it comes to like making sure the servers are up, making sure orders are being taken.
Yep.
That's all on them, right?
Yep.
We're just kind of like on the front end of that. So like, it's almost better that we're tied to it and not trying to do our own thing, because that would be a lot more problematic, but Shopify is very consistent. So generally not a problem.
That's good.
Have you thought about possibly like a subscription-based program, kind of, where you're doing maybe like 10 hours of consulting per month? And if the company utilizes that 10 hours, or if they don't, they're still, paying you, which is increasing your cash flow, eliminating kind of those ups and downs in your business?
Yeah, so we have some of those agreements. The problem with those agreements, right, is that like it's not a ton of money for us, like,
right,
and it's a lot of my time. I'm actually like thought very long and hard about like charging actually like double what we typically do. So like our average blended rate at the moment, and this is going to be recorded, so at the moment is like $150 an hour, right? But what I started to realize is like, wait, like, yes, maybe people on my team, that's their blended rate, but like my rate's probably way higher than that, because I was able to kind of prove that already to an extent. So the issue with that is like, it takes up a lot of time, and other projects I can spend like about the same amount of time, but maybe the project size is bigger, because a lot of the fixed jobs we do, it's like, hey, like normal time this will take us like 30 hours. Sometimes it takes us 20. Sometimes it takes us 15. And it's not to say like we're just mistakenly wrongly estimating things. We're giving ourselves a buffer just in case something goes wrong, which does happen from time to time. So it's kind of hard to justify those consulting relationships unless we actually like bill them a significantly higher amount.
Right.
So, but it's definitely something I even told one of my clients, I'm like, hey, I'll give this rate to you for now, but in the future, this may not be the case. Like you're kind of getting a deal here because we're young. We're kind of early.
Sounds like a salesman.
A little bit. I'm kind of preparing them for a price increase at some point. But
anyway. One last question on that. Do you structure your contracts or projects almost like a product where you give them one price to get it done so you can get the under on the time? Or do you just charge like a flat hourly rate and bid out jobs like that? Like what's been most successful for you?
I think fixed bids are probably the best for us. Okay. I think tracking hours, anytime we start tracking hours, it's like, oh, how many hours is that going to be? Then you start getting chopped down. They start saying, is that really going to take you 80 hours? It's like, oh my Lord, please help me, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Then you kind of get into this, like you were saying, like this little bit of like pricing competition with yourself almost.
Yeah.
So yeah, generally speaking, fixed bid makes the most sense for us. It's a value-based type of thing. Like, hey, we'll do this for $5,000. they agree, and it's like they're getting value, we're getting value, and if we do it in less time, great.
Yep.
Right. So fixed bids are the best.
But on the other hand, if you do it in longer times, then it's, cutting down on your revenue there. So it's kind of like
which has happened, by the way. We do have different pricing models depending on the type of client we think they are, and this is something that we've been doing. So again, this is a guy on my team. His name's Wade. He's really helping with financials too, by the way. This is not, I started it, but he kind of like has beefed it up a lot more than I have, right? Like mine's very basic and like rudimentary. He's like risk, and we got to take money away for taxes and put money away for cash. And I'm like, okay, like whatever. But like that's his jam, right? So yeah, like we have started to measure like profitability on a project, which is something that I didn't know about in the beginning. That's probably
accounting. Yeah.
It's like, oh, we actually spent 50 hours and we told them we're going to spend 30. And like, that's not good. Our margin's like 20% on this project. We're going for like 50 to 70.
Yeah.
So, and like, the thing is that might seem like nothing, but then if you think about it, if we're not making money, then like, it doesn't really make sense to run the company. It's like, if we're just breaking even all the time. It's like
100%.
There's no buffer. We're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. It's not a good situation.
Yeah.
So we've definitely had projects like that. And we've learned is like, for the most part, we try to go fixed. But if we think, hey, we're not really sure about the scope here, we're not really sure what's going on with this project, here's a range, right? This is like 30 to 50 hours. Pay us for the 30, and then we'll do the up to 30. And then if we start to go above that, we'll communicate, within like 25% of running out of those hours, hey, we need another 20 or we need another 10. Yeah. So we definitely kind of adjusted that. And again, this is like more Wade than it is me, but it's definitely something we've learned. Like used to go hourly, then was fixed. Now we're kind of like, it's almost like a mixture of all three, actually. Hourly, fixed, and range, like a range of hours. The other thing we started to do is basically say, you want to work with us, you got to pay us up front, because it's like, we can't be in the situation where it's like, pay us half. And then we hope to God that you're responsive and that you're timely and you have a ton of other stuff going on as a business.
Sure. Right? Yeah.
So it almost like puts a little bit of a fire too, where it's like the client's like, hey, I already paid the money. I want to get the value as fast as I can.
Yep.
So it kind of puts us in a better situation that they're like more concerned about it and like, oh, I want to get this done now because I already paid them. I want to get this project completed.
Yeah, I would think though that like managing the customer's expectations would be a little bit harder in that case though, where, okay, they pay you up front and now you have to deliver, the perfect product that they had in their mind that, there can't be any miscommunication at all, right? Because, you have their money, but you might lose a customer.
Yeah, this is very true. And it's something that, especially on bigger projects, we definitely have. Now we have like customer success. I feel like a big company. I'm like, we have a customer success sort of like thing where we check in with the customer. Hey, no, it's been a minute. We're still working on it. This is what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. And so.
So do you just talk in a different voice when you call over? Well, I know you've got a couple people helping you. But
yeah, that's the thing. That's not really my area. My job is like land the deals, get them in the pipeline, understand what we need to do, and then like hand them off. Now, recently, since cash has been a little bit tighter, it's like land the job, do most of the job or all of the job, and then hand it back to the customer. But that's kind of my realm. Is like, I like to be on the sales side. I don't want to like manage the expectations and other project stuff. That's cool and all. I know it needs to be done, but like, I really don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I want to focus on the growth side, the fulfillment side. I'm like, I want someone else to kind of be in the weeds and do the detail back and forth. But yeah, you're right. Like it's definitely a little bit of a difference in relationship there.
Right? Sure. Okay, so let's transition into I do a lot of reading. When I was reading about this, people were saying, well, one of the decisions to get into this type of business is work-life balance.
Yeah. Okay.
Give us the reality of.
That's not the reality is you have actually like less, honestly. Like the thing is, if you're trying to grow a business, right? Like maybe you're cool with, I don't know, $100 an hour and one client and it's, 160 hours or whatever, right? Something like this. That's totally fine if that's for you. But my thinking is I just want to keep getting us bigger and bigger. I want to grow and add a lot more value to the world than just like a few clients, right? I want to add value to like some of the biggest clients on Shopify. I want to add value to a lot more clients in general. So I would say it depends on your approach, right? Like if you take that kind of slower approach, in my opinion, more risky because you have like one client, anything can happen, right? Then like, yeah, of course you can kick it on the beach and take your laptop and everything else. I mean, me having 4 kids and whatnot and a wife, like definitely limits me as far as work-life balance, I would say, right? You can't just pick up and go to the beach and work on my laptop, right? And even then I would say, hey, if I'm working, why do I need to be at the beach anyway?
Yeah.
It's a facade, in my opinion. Like, I don't think it's a very good idea to just like take days off randomly or not for like certain occasions. I definitely have less vacation hours. I probably work more. The job is harder. Like there's all these like different, like what people would consider negatives, but I'm like, actually, this is great. Like I get to learn, I get to grow every single day. I get to figure out like big problems that actually impact my life like significantly.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's frightening, but it's so much more rewarding. So I don't even think people are like, oh, happy Friday. I'm like, oh yeah, it's Friday. I had no idea, basically. We're like, happy Monday. I'm like, yeah, I was working yesterday too already. Like, so it depends on the person, I suppose. But for me specifically, it's not a thing. Like it has not increased. It's gotten worse, I would say. Like some nights I have to take a call. They're in Australia or something like that. Say we had to call them at 6 p.m. because that's 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. their time. So for me specifically, not a thing. Maybe for others it could be, but yeah, then I feel like you're kind of living a little too risky in that being said.
Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of people think just the opposite, right? I want to be my own boss, so I can have all the work-life balance. Which, by the way, wasn't a thing as I was coming up. That's just my age, right? I mean, there was no such thing as work. It was work, right? And, and more work, right?
That sounds like more like my kind of mantra right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what are some of the leadership skills that you, since you left and started your own thing, and now you got some people? What are some of the leadership skills that you feel are either, most important for you now, or things that you had to develop, to make your work life harmonious with the people? What are some of those skills that maybe you didn't have and maybe you took for granted, that you now realize that you needed?
Yeah, what's funny is that, like, you would imagine I should have some of those when I left General Motors, right? Because I was a manager there and I had like 4 employees reporting to me. Mm-hmm. And I thought, hey, there's not much to learn, right? Like there's not much extra I need to do. But I think it's quite different when you're running a company and you're potentially even hiring part-time workers, right? You have to like find a different way to motivate them.
Yeah. And
a lot of people we hire, like, we've gotten better. So when we first were hiring people, it was more like, hey, he did the job, cool, you're hired, right? Like done. I'm very quick on hiring, which probably not the best strategy. And so what I would say, we started to learn the company culture a bit. The company culture is like, hey, you either like, we're going to throw you in the deep end and you better try to swim or you're going to sink and it's probably going to fail, right? Yeah. Or you're not going to work out here, right? So we kind of give people like the real story versus like, hey, join this company, do some web development, not really explain to them, like, when you join, there's like no training. There's no SOP. There's like a standard operating procedure. There's none of that, right? This is like, we're going to give you something and like, go figure it out. Like, and I'll try to help you as much as I can, but I'm also very busy myself, right? And I have a lot going on. So I think the main thing is for me is like learning who can actually work inside the organization and who cannot, and being very clear about that. Mm-hmm. Like I even hired a full-time guy. God love him. I love the guy. It's just, the thing is, I think the culture is just like not a good fit for him. And unfortunately it didn't work out. And he's like, hey, I just don't think I can do this anymore. And I totally respected that. And that was kind of like a aha moment. I'm like, whoa, okay. Like I did something wrong there, because like, generally speaking, you hire someone full-time, if they like it, they're just going to stick around. They're not going to quit.
Yeah.
So like, I definitely learned that company culture and like having the right kinds of people and setting that expectation is more important than like, can you do the job? Yes or no, right? So that was a main thing for me. And like that wasn't really a thing at General Motors. It was can you do the job? Okay, cool. Kind of more PC.
Yep.
And the other thing too is like, I felt like I was a bit of a stiff sometimes in corporate America, whereas at my own company, I can, drop the F-bomb and say whatever I want on these calls. Right? Yeah, I could just be like, I could just be like ridiculous and ruthless. I think you can have a little bit more fun with your employees. I feel like there's like less like HR stuff. We ask people how they're doing, what's going on in their life. So that's kind of the more fun side of like the leadership equation.
Do you have to, do you find yourself ever, when dealing with an employee that maybe it's just not a good fit or whatever, kind of taking that personally a little bit? Do you ever, or are you able to compartmentalize that and realize that, hey, this is just, part of it?
I think I just categorize it maybe just they're a bad fit, right? And I've had like two or three pretty tough conversations with like some employees that just, again, it just didn't work. And one of them is even like a pretty good friend of mine. I would consider like a good friend. We were in the same like group, like community and everything else. And yeah, I actually laid some like pretty hard boundaries with him. It's like, hey, we're gonna have to like cut down your pay a bit or something. Like, we can't pay you this amount. Like, it's too much.
Yeah.
And like the level of output we need from you, we're not really getting on a consistent basis. So like, we either need to decrease your pay or like, we can give you that rate, but if you mess up again, like big time and I have to fix it, then it's like, this is probably just not going to work.
Yeah.
So he ended up like deciding, hey, this is just not a good fit for me either. So yeah, I don't take it personally necessarily. I just kind of take it as a learning experience. And I try to make it not about the person, really. It's just more about the X's and O's of business, basically, and like culture of the company.
Yep.
Try to make it less about me, more about the solutions we're building, the rate we're paying, and the margins we're getting, basically.
Especially at this stage of where you're at, you can't afford a lot of extra fat or complacency necessarily. So you kind of have to be kind of draconian at times.
Yeah, it seems to me like you got to find people like yourself.
Yeah.
You've got to model, the employees are just an extension of you anyway, right? So you got to find the guys that are willing to do, to grind it out and hustle it out and treat it like their own.
You're exactly right. That's it. That's exactly who we look for. Like, seriously. And that, to your point, like maybe it's because we're so small. Part of me is like, maybe we'll just always be this way. But
unfortunately, though, that can lead to like the butting of heads and conflict, right? Because you have people with similar personalities all kind of mixing it up together, right? And unfortunately, in the long run, that may or may not work out unless you have like that person inside that can always, buffer, to be the mediator.
Yeah, we do have a project manager. She's very good at that. And we also we kind of segment the projects. We're like, this one person, this is your project. Some of the projects are big enough or like small enough to we can segment stuff off. Mm-hmm. There has been a little bit of like friction, like, hey, I want to do that. And I'm like, we have you working on this other project. Like, don't do that yet, basically. Someone else is already working that anyway.
Have you pulled I own this company? have you, be honest, have you pulled that one yet? Yeah.
I don't know if I've verbatim said that before. I don't think I've ever said that.
Good for you.
Thought that really.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah, because it's like, people are going to work the way they want to. And like, it's up to me as the leader to like set them straight and give them the right path. And if it doesn't work, like I definitely call myself out in a few different situations where like, hey, I didn't do a very good job either in this situation. Right. And I think that's important as a leader. I didn't really do that at previous roles. Like I was like, hey, I goofed, like I mess up our financials. I even told people at the company, like, hey, we have cash flow problems. What am I going to, I literally tell my employees that and I don't know if that freaks them out or not, but I'm like, hey, this is what it is. I'm like, you're not going to, what's that?
It's harder than it looks.
Oh yeah. And I'm like, we're probably going to cut your work back a little bit and Luke's going to have to work more. Like, this is how it's going to go for a little bit, but we're going to pull you back in the fold. Don't worry. Like, we just got to smooth this over.
So Luke, if there's a person out there considering following this path, so they're going to quit their job, they're going to, go into their whatever it is full time. What is the advice that you would give them?
You have to love what you do. I think that's number one. Yeah, you have to make sure whatever that gig or whatever that thing you're doing, you have to be super passionate about it. If you're not, you're probably not going to make it, right? Because think about my journey and my path. I was working early mornings, late nights. That was out of necessity, but it's also because I was curious and I thought it was cool,
You gotta want it.
Yes. And the thing is, and you got to be able to hustle a little bit. Like if you're like, oh, I want to have my week every single weekend and I don't want to do late nights or early mornings. I'm sure this is the job for you, right? Because if you're trying to build something for yourself, then you kind of have to put in a little extra work. Yeah. It's not going to just be like you walk in the door and you're making $100,000 a year or something like that.
Yeah.
You have to build it. And sometimes when you're building, that requires sacrifice. It's kind of like if you're trying to like lose weight or something like this, you got to go to the gym. You got to eat right. You got to sacrifice something, right?
Sweat equity.
Yeah, that's exactly a good way to say it. Yes. And so I would say if you haven't really built up that sort of, I call it hustle muscle, which is basically like the ability to just like push through and like grind and actually sacrifice things to say, no, I'm not going out. I want to complete this project, right? I want to build this company. I don't think this is for you. Don't leave your job, basically, is what I would say. So like those two things I would say is you got to be passionate. You got to love it. And also just make sure you have enough hustle in you and that you really want this. And you're willing to like say no to cool events and family events and friend events. Yeah. I don't really have like friends. I mean, they're all online, right? And we're like through WhatsApp. I don't like go to places. This is rare for me, you know?
Right.
So,
I think one thing a lot of people underestimate is when you do this, you're actually, and I think you can attest to this, it's actually you're doing more than just your job. You're doing everything, right? Running a business is a job and it's probably 3 full-time jobs, right? And then on top of that, you got to do the work, right? And you got to get the clients, got to make them happy. You got to get the flow. So, okay, you got to hire the employees. You got to
make sure they're happy.
Yeah.
Okay, so everything's been asked, everything's been said. Is there anything else that you want to share with everybody? You know, right now is your chance to, is there anything else you want to share?
I think it goes back to what I was saying when I first got started in the journey is that like follow your heart. Stop like the world likes to tell us a lot of different things and they like to tell us what to believe and what we should and should not do. I say throw that out the window. Like if you really want to do something, try it. Like at least try. And don't let your head get in the way, right? If your heart is really saying, hey, I really feel like this is the right thing for me, go for it. Maybe it doesn't work. Like I've done a lot of stuff that doesn't work. Mm-hmm. This could very well be one of them. I don't know where this is going, right? Necessarily. So I would say go with your heart, go with your gut, and throw logic out the window sometimes because logic isn't everything. And I think the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, I call it God, is going to reward courage. It's like if you take a shot, sometimes if it's the right thing for you and like everything's aligned, like good things will happen. Mm-hmm. I've been at like the business. I'm like, oh my gosh, God, I don't know if this is the right thing for me. Like this is really scary. Like I can literally had to delay our pay like a day or two, right? And I'm like, this is not good. Anytime I've doubted it, it's like something big comes through. And it's almost like a spiritual experience in a way. And I'm like, whoa, this is kind of scary. It's also like, that's what I would say. Like, I think too much. We're letting the world dictate. We're letting the media dictate. The economy's bad. Don't do this. Don't do that. I just kind of shut all that off and said, like, forget all that. Like, I'm just going to kind of roll with what I think is best. And I don't watch news or anything like that anymore. I probably watch entrepreneurship podcasts and things of that nature more than anything. And yeah, I think it's the main thing. Don't play scared.
I call it living life 20 feet in front of your face, right? I mean, sometimes we let all of this stuff come in and it affects us and how we think and whatever. And we forget that life is actually happening, right here. So, okay, with that, so thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. Love the conversation. For those of you listening out there, hit the like, hit the subscribe. Brendan, anything else from you?
Luke, tell us where we can find you. On your, I believe you're on LinkedIn. You have other pages.
LinkedIn's probably the best. Just Luke Tull. You should be able to look me up. I work at Dekstech. It's DEKSTECH.com. That's where you can find our website as well.
Perfect. Thanks,
Cool.
Luke.
We'll put that link in our bio.
Yeah.
Zach, anything from you?
No, that really appreciated it. Very insightful. Wishing you all the best, going forward.
Thanks.
You got a lot of work to do, but you're the guy to do it. I know it. So
Yeah, good luck, man. Yeah, good luck.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
All right, drop the mic out.